here real quick. All right, we're told that there's no audio coming through, so I'll just go ahead and and redo everything that we had there at the start with it. So, uh, so everybody, welcome to the Columbia Memorial Space Center. We're very excited to have you here today because this is a very cool place, very interesting place that we're all at. And what's up, Rick? Okay, cool. We got it now. So, all right. Hi, everybody. Nice to have you hear me with that there. Here at the Columbia Memorial Space Center, my name is Jared. I'm one of the aerospace educators here. We're up on the second floor, and we like to be up here on the second floor because it is actually a very special place to us. Up here on the second floor, we talk about how we live and work in space. And that's kind of a big deal because we have 7 astronauts on the International Space Station right now. So they're up there, they're living, they're working. We've had a continuous human presence on board of the space station for over 20 years now. Pretty amazing that we were able to do that. So it's a real triumph of engineering and logistics and other things like that. And we like the second floor because we do talk about the space station up here. And I'm actually sitting inside of a module from the International Space Station. So whenever we're allowed to come back and you can come visit us here at the Space Center, this exhibit right here on the second floor, sort of in the middle of it, is the size of the Columbus module on the International Space Station. So this right here is how big a module is actually inside of the space station. So you can see it's actually a pretty roomy place and a nice place to go to. And then right here, we also have what's called Iss Above. This is a piece of equipment that actually allows us to see live telemetry from the space station and also some nice live views. So you can see right now that they are currently over one of the Earth's oceans. Looks like the Banda Sea, wherever that is. Unfortunately, I'm not that geographically good to know where specifically that is at. But we're going to be talking today about space stations and how we operate them and other things like that. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump right back into it. And of course, don't forget, we're going to have a question and answer session after this as well. Send your questions into the comments, the chat box, please. We will definitely write them down. And then after our quick presentation that we've got here, we'll talk about, we'll get your questions and we'll answer them. And if I don't know, I'll say I don't know. So that's, that's kind of how we're going to roll with it today. So let us return once again to low Earth orbit with that. So hopefully you all are prepared and ready to go as we start off our journey in low Earth orbit here with this beautiful, absolutely stunning facility that is known as the International Space Station. Truly an international effort, 16 countries coming together so far, over 3 decades of work going into this and continuing as well until at least 2024, possibly out to 2028, maybe even further out if a commercial partner comes in and helps out as well. But space stations, they are not a new idea. And this is pretty surprising for most people when they find out about it. And I mean, it was surprising for me when I was putting this presentation together. There actually were space stations, and I'm sure even you, Rick, didn't know that there were ideas for space stations way back in the day. And how back in the day am I talking? All the way back in 1869. There was a story that was written by an American author called The Brick Moon. It's a short story by Edward Everett Hale, and it is about a group that is building a 200-foot wide sphere out of bricks to put in the sky going around the Earth to help people navigate. And there's actually some really interesting things in that story, besides the fact that you're chucking a 200-foot sphere of bricks into orbit, which just to let you know, probably wouldn't work out all that well. But Edward Everett Hale actually did some very interesting things in his story. He figured out that you would need at least 4 satellites or 4 objects in orbit in your sky to actually do navigation correctly. So he was thinking about how GPS works. Well, it's 100 years before we were even beginning to launch the experimental GPS satellites that the military was using. So the Brick Moon very short story written by Hale in 1869. Essentially, they're putting it in space. A few people are accidentally on that brick moon when they launch it into space, and you can see that there they are, floating haplessly, trying to figure out how to get back to Earth. It looks like they brought some palm trees with them, along with a beautiful ring of what appears to be bricks or books. Haven't been able to determine which of those yet, but this is considered historically the first depiction of an artificial satellite around the Earth. So basically, the first thing that would have ever been launched into space to orbit the Earth. And this is back in 1869. So a little bit of forward thinking from Edward Everett Hale there. So very, very cool stuff. Now, we run all the way to the middle of the 20th century. A little bit of time, as Edward Everett Hale was kind of, how would I say, way ahead of his time with that there. And what's so cool is that we had a whole bunch of scientists come together under the tutelage of Werner Von Braun in the 1950s. Now, he was a rocket scientist that came to the United States after World War II. And if you'd like to learn the history of that, you can kind of grab that on your own. It's a very long story that we don't have the time for today. But one of the things that he did was sort of develop the first rockets that the United States would use, both in terms of missiles and putting people on top of those missiles. And he did continue all the way to the Saturn V as well. So a very big collection of rockets on his part, and great engineering as well. But one of the things that he was also interested in was bringing people to space, regular everyday people like you and me. So he came up with these ideas that you could put space stations in orbit and send people there. And he also realized that with the physics that a Russian mathematician named Konstantin Tsiolkovsky did at the early 20th century. Again, another person very well ahead of their time. He figured out that if you rotate this very big station, you can actually generate artificial gravity through the force of it rotating. So he kind of came up with this wheel idea right here, and we love this one. This is a nice little illustration by Chesley Bonestell, one of the classic space artists of the 20th century. And Werner Von Braun hooked up with a lot of people who got his ideas very widely disseminated. One of them, Walt Disney. He appeared on The Wonderful World of Disney so many times during the 50s that he really did end up putting a huge influence on engineering and space flight during that time. And of course, that influence is very well seen in movies. Of course, one of my just favorite movies, period, 2001, A Space Odyssey, with the Pan Am Clipper down there approaching the space station that's in orbit around the Earth as they're getting ready to head off to the Earth's moon at some point. So, this is like the little staging area for when you're going to be heading off there. Nice hotel, I've heard, inside of that space station right there. But it really wasn't until the 1960s when really everyone started to kind of think, how can we put people in space and keep them there for a very long time? And it was not scientifically driven at first. This is Almaz. This is what the Soviet Union during that time period was developing. So what is Almaz? Well, basically, it was a military space station. They sent up a module that several military astronauts could get into and take photographs, basically spying on whatever country they would orbit above. During that time period, you were mostly doing your photo reconnaissance via airplane. And if you know anything about a fellow named Francis Gary Powers getting shot down in the U-2 in 1960, those incidences and other things that you kind of wanted to go a little higher than airplanes can. And that's where these sort of space station ideas came from, and the Soviets coming up with their military Almaz space station. Now, it was not just the Soviets who were thinking about doing this as well. The United States had something called Manned Orbital Laboratory, MOL, M-O-L. And this was going to be basically an extension of the Gemini program. So we had the three major programs, the three big Crude programs in the push to get humans to the moon. We had Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo. Gemini was the one in the middle. It was sort of like the prove everything that Apollo can do before we do Apollo program. Often forgotten, definitely overlooked, one of my favorite programs as well. This is basically the United States Air Force saying, hey, we're going to pick up the Gemini program where you've left off at, except we're going to send up 2 astronauts and we're going to have them do science when they get up there by photographing the Earth. And of course, they're going to have these really big lenses that are going to be photographing strategic targets in the Soviet Union, so that you can get, that data about your opponent as fast as possible. So that was the idea. A very cool thing about Manned Orbital Laboratory, it was actually going to launch out of Vandenberg Air Force Base here in California. Just about roughly 120 miles west of Los Angeles. Yes, there is land west of Los Angeles in California. And yeah, it was pretty exciting that they were going to do that. And they didn't. And then that pad that they were going to launch from is actually going to become the shuttles pad when they were planning to launch shuttles from California as well. And then after the Challenger accident, they decided to scrap that. And then finally, those launch pads did get picked up by Boeing's and United Launch Alliance's Delta IV program, and they have just a handful more launches from that launch pad until then. And it's a very beautiful launch pad. Look up Slick 6 SLC 6 at Vandenberg if you can. It's a very pretty site. Now, they did eventually actually send people. We sort of were doing the military work as well, but also wanted to see how humans would react to staying in space. During the space race, the United States basically beat the Soviet Union to really only about one thing, and that was getting people to land on the moon. The Soviets kind of were beating the United States at a lot of different things. And one of those was developing space stations. So once the United States looked like they were going to be beating the Soviet Union pretty fair and square to the moon, the Soviet Union basically said, well, forget about it. We're just going to start working in orbit and kind of see that, because the next step after the moon is flying to, say, Mars. So we got to think, what are people going to be doing long term during these flights? How's the human body going to react to that long term? So got to figure that out. And Earth orbit's a really good place to do that, because if something goes wrong, you're just about 90 minutes away from rescue or landing back on the surface of the Earth. So it's hours instead of days, or in the case of going somewhere like Mars, years to getting help. So good place to do it is in Earth orbit. And that's what the Soviet Union did. This is Salyut 1, which first flew with a crew in 1971. So we're talking before the official end of the lunar Apollo program for the United States. The Soviets were already flying these space stations. Now they're called monolithic space stations. Monolithic basically means that we've got one big piece. And that's going to come in handy a little bit later, because there's going to be a very big leap in the design of space stations that's going to sort of change. It will change everything forever, as the movie trailer says. So Salyut, the Soviets launched multiple Salyut stations, Salyut 1 through 7, all the way into the early 80s. One of the Salyut stations actually did have a cannon on board, and they did shoot it while it was in orbit, just as a test to see if you would need one to do defense in case you had war enter into space. And they did not have Soviet astronauts on board of the station at that time, which I guess shows just how much faith they had and it was going to work. And it did work. They ended up firing off quite a few times during a test, and that was it. That's the last time anybody's fired anything off in space like that. So they did it, but there was really no practical purpose to it other than just to, see if it would actually work. Now, for the United States, during this time period, they started to get interested in doing what's called the Apollo Applications Programs. Basically, we're going to take Apollo hardware, something that's already been built and established, and we're going to do non-Apollo things with it. We're going to do something different than going to the moon. One of those things that they wanted to do was called the Crude Venus Flyby. And Crude Venus Flyby is exactly what it sounds like. We're going to fly a crew by Venus. So they're going to be in space for a very long period of time. They'll fly by Venus, and then they'll have another long period of time before they come back to the Earth. Something like the course of a year and a half, 2 years on that. So they'll just fly by Venus and then come right back, just to get more science and because we can. And that was going to be sort of the capstone of the Apollo Applications Program. At this point, Mars was being considered as its own separate program. And one of those ways that they wanted to see how humans would react to space is to develop a space station and have them stay in orbit. So just like the Soviet Union thought, hey, we're going to stay in low Earth orbit, the United States did the exact same thing. And we came up with Skylab right here, which is one of the most interesting programs in the history of United States spaceflight. And definitely, I think Skylab and the Gemini program are both sort of head to head as to who is the most underrated and underappreciated of our space programs that we've had here in the United States. But Skylab was amazing. They basically took the third stage of a Saturn V and had it carry no fuel. It was designed with an interior, so that way you could actually put astronauts in it once it was done with launch. And that's what it is. It's huge. It's massive. And to kind of show you an idea of just how big it is, we have this very cool video from a YouTuber called Retro Space HD. So I just want to give a shout out to Retro Space HD because they take these amazing films that NASA has and then restores them to things like this. So this is kind of going through from the bottom of Skylab up to the top of it. And just take a look at how big this is. So this is, again, a monolithic station. So we're looking at one big module here. And you can see inside of there, that's pretty big. That's a sizable station. Ended up flying 3 crews to Skylab. And here they are. We're coming down into the sort of the area where the crew hangs out at. There's the dinner table right there. And we're going to have a astronaut doing what I would do, which is look out the window right there, and looks like he's just kind of taking a break. He's saying hello and he's having a snack at the same time. And now he's doing what I would do, which is talk to everybody while on the ceiling there. So very, very cool. So just once again, Retro Space HD, go check them out. They are everything they do is absolutely fantastic. I absolutely love all of the work that they have, and I love this because that is the astronaut Pete Conrad, probably definitely one of the most entertaining astronauts in the history of astronauts. He flew, his main claim to fame is flying on Apollo 12 as the commander. So he was the 3rd person to walk on the moon. He's got my favorite first words on the moon, which is that might have been a small one for Neil, but it was a big one for me. So he's a pretty funny guy, I gotta say. And he's sort of in this tube thing right there, which this is something that Skylab had that no space station has ever had since, and that is a shower. So they actually had the shower on board where they had a nozzle where you can spray water, but obviously you're weightless, you're in microgravity. So that water would fly out everywhere. So they got this nice tube to hold the water and also add some privacy as well, although he looks like he's Pete there looks like he's having a good time during that, I guess, interruption, if you will. Now, they didn't end up using this, unfortunately, because it uses a lot of water, and water, air, food, and other things like that are limited resources in space. You can't just like stick a bucket outside of your space station and grab some water. That ain't nothing there. And also, it took a very long time, almost an hour, to set up the shower. So why even bother? Just get some wet wipes and wipe yourself down, and that's still what we use today. And actually, a really good one from our chat room, Kevin McCoy says that Skylab was built by the U.S., designed in Holland. So that's a nice one there. So yeah, good one on that, Kevin, with that. Now we kind of fast forward a little bit here because the United States flew those missions up into having a crew of 3 astronauts on board for 84 days with Skylab 4. And then we get into that major evolutionary leap of space stations. The Salyut space stations and Skylab are what we call monolithic, right? A single module. Well, the Soviet Union started to develop a even bigger space station. They decided that they were going to do something called a modular space station. That means that we have multiple modules that we're going to attach to each other. So this is going to require multiple launches. We're going to have multiple systems coming together and actually working as one. And that's exactly what we have with this space station right here, which is called Mir. And first launched in the 80s and continued all the way with crew until 2001 when its time was wrapped up there. Mir was an absolutely a very fantastic place to go to. Definitely a interesting space station if you read up on the history of it and some of the things that were and may or may not have happened on Mir there. And one of the biggest things about Mir is that it was in orbit during the fall of the Soviet Union. So when the Soviet Union became what we would now say is Russia. And the Soviet Union was maintaining it, and then Russia had to come in and essentially take over, if you will. That's very much simplifying what happened during that time period. But it was a little difficult. It was sort of not very well in the cards as to whether Mir was going to continue or not. And the United States at the same time was having a very difficult a very difficult time with developing its own space station. So in the 80s, the United States started up Space Station Alpha, and then the Soviets were going to do one, so we renamed it very quickly to Space Station Freedom, and then a whole bunch of names throwing around for our own modular space station. But then we realized, once the Soviet Union fell, that we actually didn't really have a lot of experience in developing modular space stations, but the Soviets, now Russians, do. So what if we came together and collaborated? And that's also another very big oversimplification of what actually happened as well. There was a lot of politics involved in that, a lot of keep the engineers here and other economic reasons for it as well. Basically, the United States and Russia came together and said, let's develop a space station together, and then we'll see if there's any other international partners that would like to be a part of it as well. And one of the very big steps to making the International Space Station happen was having space shuttles visit Mir on multiple missions, and also having NASA astronauts go to Mir and stay with the cosmonauts that would be on board of Mir as well. So this was a very big exchange. This was a very big program. We, of course, love to talk about it here at the Columbia Memorial Space Center because we are the home of the space shuttle here. That is our claim because they were designed and built here. So, so there's some of our handiwork attached to Mir right there, looking absolutely amazing. And just to give you sort of a perspective of how big things are here, a space shuttle is about the size of a 737, so a good sized airplane. So Mir is about the size of a good sized airplane there. So because the shuttle is no small thing. So this program was highly successful. Multiple American astronauts stayed on board of Mir, and similarly, American astronauts were transported by Russian rockets, and Russian astronauts were transported by the space shuttle as well. So it was a really great exchange of ideas, technology, knowledge, and culture that was going on there, which then moves us on to the International Space Station. And I love this video because this was taken just last weekend by the Cargo Dragon that went up. So not SpaceX's Dragon spacecraft that flew Crew back in the middle of November. This was just a couple weeks ago when they were delivering payloads. So this is an automated rendezvous, but that's the International Space Station. This has been sped up quite a lot, but the International Space Station is about the size of an American football field. So it's not small at all. And actually you could see Crew Dragon sort of sitting on the front of it there. As we begin to line up with where it's going to park, where our Cargo Dragon here is going to park at. And I love when we go into nighttime here because you begin to see the lights of cities as we're on orbit here, and we move in a little bit closer to where we're eventually going to be docking at. There we go. Now we're in nighttime. There's those lights of cities below, and it's just so beautiful to see that. So living on board of the International Space Station, what is it like for all of those astronauts who are there right now? Well, it's a pretty interesting place. How do you sort of keep yourself clean? This is Karen Nyberg. She is washing her hair right there. They have shampoo that basically stays in their hair, and then you kind of wash it out. So with my mohawk, I think I'd have to do something very close to Karen there, and we'll see if I even get allowed to take any product or hairspray with me up there. Other astronauts, like Luca Parmitano, who's going to be coming up here in just a second. His is a little more simple. There we go. Piece of cake for him with that. So very well done on that. And then of course you gotta be able to cut your partner's hair while you're up in orbit with your crewmates. So I would have to put a lot of trust in people to do that. This is sort of what the crew quarters look like. We'll take a little closer look into there in just a little bit with that. So kind of get this nice little sleeping bag. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So if you like camping, it should work well. The food is not bad on board of the International Space Station. What you got here is strawberries in milk on shortbread. So, I mean, that sounds a lot better than stuff from tubes, which that was sort of back in the Mercury and Gemini times back in the 60s with that there. So the food today is a lot better. Food is very important psychologically for astronauts. So, and of course, if you're an astronaut, you got to have some fun with your food, right? Because, I mean, why not? Who's going to stop you, right? You're in space. So I know I would definitely be having some fun with my food up there. Now we're just spinning around with some nuts in a nice little tin can there, and just showing some physics off as they spin around. Now adding some water. So a lot of the food still requires water to be added to it. You can either have it cold or hot, and the food is still significantly more palatable than it was before. This astronaut's squeezing out some honey right there and putting it on, yes, a tortilla. We don't take bread into space, we use tortillas because they have a much better shelf life, and in addition to that, they don't crumb up as well. And if you're in microgravity, you don't want your stuff flying around, so you gotta be really careful with your tools. Don't want a hammer flying out and hitting somebody. And then you're gonna run experiments as well. And here they are, they're testing some experiments that are looking at free floating spacecraft. Do they have to deal with cable problems like you often have to do when trying to charge your phone? Yes, it's different stuff up on the station, but they still have to make sure that those cables work. Here's Luca coming in, kind of showing how you go around the space station, and he's going to do a nice little Superman right there. Very good. So you kind of use your hands and feet on those little rails that are built all over the space station, and you just float around, just hanging out in your space station, on board of the ISS. And the ISS is pretty good sized, roughly about the interior volume of a large suburban house. So much better than an Apollo capsule, significantly more room than a space shuttle. So definitely the kind of place that I think a lot of people would maybe not necessarily want to spend 6 months in, but you could. And now they're going to be opening up a cargo spacecraft here and pulling some cargo out. So first they're going to open up the interior hatch for the space station, and then they're going to actually open up the hatch for the cargo craft. They're going to put some face masks and safety glasses on because of any dust or debris that may be in the cargo craft that didn't get cleaned up. Luca's a very good artist, as you can see right there. So he's he's definitely a pretty fun astronaut, in case you thought everybody was very serious when they're up there. And there you go. There's all of your fresh cargo. Ooh, so there's going to be lots of equipment, lots of spare parts, other things like that. You may also have food on board, water, fuel, air for the atmosphere, other things like that. You also may get some stuff from home, like fresh fruits and vegetables, ice cream, little gifts from your friends and family or coworkers back on the ground. So they often will send up care packages and other things. And there's Chris Hadfield right there, pretty well-known astronaut from his videos he did during his expedition as commander. And of course, when you're in space, you got to work out. That's because you're in microgravity. So your body basically says, hey, I don't feel gravity pulling on me, so I don't need to maintain my muscles or bones anymore. So you have to kind of trick your body into that. So you work out a couple hours every day. There's Sunita Williams, who's going to be flying back to the space station on a Boeing Starliner. So either next year or in 2022. So going to be awesome to see her back on station. And then of course, what are you running on the wall for? Positions are relative where you are. And just to let you know, that is the outhouse right next to the bathroom, and we'll get to that in just a second with that there. So this is your nice little quarters that you have there. This is Scott Kelly's quarters that he had for the year in space mission that he flew. You could see that he's got a couple laptops there to keep himself entertained. Also an iPad up there as well. Plenty of Velcro around to kind of put whatever you want. And you can see he's got like a drinking bag up top. So you might have, say, like a juice drink or coffee, because you have that on board the station. And he's also got the little sleeping bag over on the right there. And those are called cayutas. And they were actually from Mir. And the American astronauts would see them and basically said, we want those when we go to the space station. And the cayuta is attached to the wall, and you get in it, and it's kind of like a sleeping bag. It's got a nice little spot for your head to be out of, and your arms. So if you're like me, I sleep with my arms crossed, which is apparently weird. I don't know. It's just the way I've always done it. But I have that little hole to kind of have my arms out like that. And it's attached to the wall, because if you weren't attached to the wall, the circulation inside of there would have you start drifting around, and you kind of don't want to do that. You kind of want to stay in the same place. So very, very important like that. And here's your food. You got a really big selection of a multitude of things. Like we said, a lot of those you're going to add water to it, either hot or cold with that. So you can see that you still have a very big selection of what you'd like to do. So things like cereal, oatmeal, chicken tortilla sandwiches, other things like that. So, and honestly, something, it sounds super good to me. Barbecue beef brisket, like holy moly. Like hopefully it's good, because like you got to make that good if you want to. Kevin McCoy's got a good question, which is, does water come up in jugs, or is there a separate way of transporting it? They bring them up in bags, and then they add it to the system that's on board of the station where it's stored at. So they kind of look like duffel bags when they're in there. So it's actually pretty interesting watching that get put away like that. I also like this too. This was a last year where they actually made pizzas on board of the station. They're not traditional pizzas because you can't cook anything on the station, but they tried to do it as best they can. It looks like everybody was having a good time with that there. Of course, if you get some downtime, you can look out the window. I know I would definitely do that if I was on station and I had some downtime. Just go into a area of the station called the Cupola here, which is basically, I guess, a nice big viewing area where you've got windows all around you. And they actually do functionally use that area to monitor spacecraft that are arriving for both docking and berthing and undocking and release. So it does serve a purpose besides just looking out. But I mean, that's a pretty epic photo if you ask me. So I think that would be my next Facebook photo if I were doing something like that. And of course, I talked about the bathroom, right? Because if you gotta go, you gotta go, right? And this is the throne aboard the International Space Station. You can see that they've got that sort of like bucket-looking device at the bottom, and then that tubing over on the right. And that tubing over on the right is what you do if you have to urinate. It basically uses a fan that separates your urine from the air that's coming through. And in addition to that, that bucket at the bottom also has a fan. You'll put a bag in it, and that basically catches your poop when you go out. So really no way to gracefully say this, but yeah, that's the way it works. Toilet can be a bit finicky as well. So you have to aim accordingly. And actually, one thing that they do as astronauts is they actually will go through a training course on how to sit on the toilet correctly, because you have to have a good seal. If you don't have a good seal, things can go very wrong very quickly, and everyone will be very mad at you. So this is a question. Whoever this one is from, didn't get to see who it was written down by, but do they have to bring it back with them? So that leads to my next spot, which is for the poop. It's in that bag, so they'll put it into an area where it will be stored until a cargo vehicle arrives. Typically, the cargo vehicles are not reusable. They burn up on after the end of their missions. They'll fire the engines, slow them down. They'll fall out of orbit and burn up in the Earth's atmosphere. That's how they get rid of trash. So, as you can imagine, they put the poop on board of those. They hold on to it until it's time, or they hold on to the poop in the bags in a very special place to make sure that it's not getting everywhere or stinking up the entire station. And then once the time comes, somebody has the honor of pulling that out and sticking it into the cargo craft that they're going to get rid of. But that is just the poop. Now your urine on board of the station will go into this, which is the water recovery system. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It will pull the water out of urine and recover it for drinking. So yes, your pee on board of the station ends up getting turned back into drinking water. And it's not just that as well. Humidity on board of the station is controlled, and they can do that by pulling water out of the air and using this system and recycling it. So for most people, that sounds very, very bad. But in terms of cutting down on the amount of weight that you have to take up every single time you send a cargo vehicle to the station, it does add up over time. Like this comment from Iss Above, which says shooting poop stars. Yeah, I think there's a great interview with Chris Hadfield somewhere, and the interviewer asked him, like, what do you do with your clothes when you're done with it? And he said, oh yeah, well, we wear our clothes for a couple days because obviously you're not like sweating too badly up in space and things like that. but eventually you put it in and it burns up on reentry. So Chris Hadfield said, so the next time you're seeing that beautiful light going through your window and there's dust speckles in it, one of those could be from my underwear. So yeah, good stuff, Chris. We really appreciate that thought. That was pretty good right there. Okay, so this I know, right? It's always good to think about that. Thanks, Rick. I appreciate I appreciate the look that I just got. So very good stuff. So this is this is our current crew. Oh no, do I want to go? Kevin McCoy says, "When you wish upon a star." Oh boy, I better not sing it because of the algorithm. But oh man, that's oh boy, you guys are having fun with me today, so that's pretty good. So here's our current crew on board of the International Space Station. We'll go left to right here. So we've got Kate Rubins right there. So she's very fun fact about Kate Rubins, by the way. She ended up flying to space. She ended up launching for this mission on her birthday. So she's one of only a handful of astronauts who have launched to space on their birthday. And if you're a huge sci-fi nerd, she has major credit because she launched on her 42nd birthday. So if you know about Hitchhiker's Guide, the number 42, she launched on her 42nd birthday. Nobody's ever going to top that, I think. It's just not happening. Next to her is Victor Glover, who is actually the first African American to be on a long duration space flight in the International Space Station. So awesome that we got that. We also, next to him, have Soichi Noguchi, who is from Japan, the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency, probably better known to most folks as JAXA. And then in the middle there, we have Sergei Ryzhikov, who is the current commander on board. And then next to him, we've got Mike Hopkins, who was commanding the Crew Dragon that just recently flew. And we've got Shannon Walker next to him there. And then we've got Sergei Kurshchikov next to her as well. So we've got 7 astronauts on board of station right now. So very, very cool. We're going to have another crew launching relatively soon, and then another commercial crew mission in March, which I don't recall immediately who are the 4 astronauts that are going to be flying on it, but I do know it's 2 NASA astronauts, one from another astronaut from JAXA from Japan, and then I believe Thomas Pesquet, who is a French astronaut from the European Space Agency, will be flying on that flight as well. So really cool that we're getting these really big international crews. So it's no longer just like a bunch of Americans and Russians and like somebody from some other country. We're starting to get an actual like truly multinational crew flying on the International Space Station. So it's living up to its name. Now, of course, the United States and other countries are not the only countries that are doing their own stations. This is Tiangong 2, which is one of the space stations that China has flown to space. They have flown 2 currently, Tiangong 1 and Tiangong 2. Tiangong 1 was sort of a test of their systems to see if it would work, and they actually did have a couple of their own astronauts go visit it on a few missions. And Tiangong 2 was sort of like a systems test for a upcoming space station that China will be building on their own, a very big modular space station. We don't know what the name of it is yet, but we do know that the core modules are being built, and they're actually supposed to probably start launching next year. So that should be pretty exciting to see that happen. In addition to that, we also have India working on their own space station. India, the Indian Space Research Organization, or ISRO, big shout out to them because they do some amazing work with what they do with their missions throughout the solar system in orbit around the Earth. They're working towards developing a crewed capability, so basically being able to launch their own astronauts from India. And that's going to be very, very exciting to see them. They are working on their own spacecraft. They are working on their own space station. So that's very, very cool. And hopefully, maybe we can get some American astronauts to visit it. Maybe we can get some astronauts from India to visit the International Space Station as well. It'd be very, very cool. Before I move on, Iss Above has a really great comment here, which is Scott Kelly, who was the American that did the year-long mission in space. So Scott Kelly told me, well, using the bathroom on the ISS is not the most favorite aspect of being in space. At least my poop turns into shooting stars. That's poetry if I've ever heard it. So that's pretty amazing, I gotta say. So what's the future for space stations looking like besides the the upcoming big space station from China and a upcoming space station from India that we don't know how big it'll be yet, but other than those two, well, as a part of the Artemis program, we are planning to put a station in orbit around the moon called Lunar Gateway. And right now, what that's going to be used for is sort of like the rest stop on the way to the moon. We're going to have the landers that the astronauts will be using for the first woman and the next man to land on the moon. And we'll attach them to Lunar Gateway. And then when the time comes, a crew will arrive at Lunar Gateway. They'll get into the lander, and then they will move to the surface of the moon from there. Once they're done with their surface operations, they'll launch and come back to Lunar Gateway, and their spacecraft's ready there for them to come back home to the Earth. So Lunar Gateway, another station. This one's going to be out of low Earth orbit, in orbit around the moon. Also, international partners involved in that as well. The European Space Agency is helping out with that, and Russia, kind of on the border with that. We'll kind of see how that goes with that. You know, it would be great for Russia to be a part of it. It's always great to have that international cooperation. Always great to have more partners to help out and enjoy the fruits of the labor that get done here. So I will definitely have to take a look at that. In addition to that, NASA has had a lot of success with their commercial cargo and the commercial crew programs. So now NASA is actually starting to work with private companies to develop their own modules for the space station as well. The Cargo Dragon that arrived just last weekend was actually carrying a commercially developed airlock that will release satellites out of it. So this is something that NASA did not build. This is something that a private company built, and it's going to be used there. This right here, though, is a rendering from a company called Axiom Space, which is actually actively working with NASA and has several contracts with them right now to build their own modules and then attach them to the International Space Station, where they may then end up being separated at the end of the space station's lifetime to develop their own free-flying space station as well. So they're hoping to fly a module sometime to the station within the next 4 years. That's sort of the goal for them. I really like their take on the cupola down at the bottom right there. So the cupola is, somewhere, so, you could get like half of your body in there. Axiom there has a cupola that you could literally just like put your whole self in down there. So that looks very, very cool. Axiom is also sort of being a deal broker for the private space flights that people are purchasing to take to the International Space Station. So later in 2021, there's actually going to be a Crew Dragon flight with a private astronaut that will be carrying Tom Cruise and a film director. And I do not know. I don't recall who the fourth person is going to be on that flight. I know that they're a business person from, I want to say either Europe or Israel, somewhere in there. But we'll find out about that. I'd rather not say the wrong things on air. But we do know that Tom Cruise and the director of several movies that Tom Cruise has been with are going to be going to the station to film. Don't know what they're filming, but it will be the first, I guess, Hollywood film of those levels of production filmed in space. So that's going to be pretty exciting. Also, Russia's going to be doing that as well next year with their Soyuz. They're going to have that as well. And Iss Above says they like the detail. That's good. And a shout out to ISRO. Yeah, it's so exciting to see the international expansion of human spaceflight. I can't help but agree with that, Iss Above. It's just fantastic to watch this momentum of spaceflight opening up to as many avenues as possible, and even with private companies as well, it's getting very exciting. So what does the future of space stations look like? Are we going to have these massive stations where people are going to be spending the rest of their lives on board? Some of them may not even leave the station. They may just spend their entire lives on board of these massive places where life sort of looks like this sort of idealistic place to go. Well, who knows in the future? It would be pretty cool to be on one of those. So I definitely would not say no if somebody were to tap me and say, hey, do you want to go live at one of these? I think I'd be pretty on board with being able to do that now. So that is the wrapping up of our little presentation portion of that. I'm actually going to kind of move over here so you can see this with our Iss Above right now telling us when the space station will be visible in the next visible pass for us here at the Space Center. So what's so cool about Iss Above is that not only does it provide those live views and the live data where everything is at. It will also tell you when the space station is going over for you to go out and take a look at, where to look, how bright it'll be, other things like that. I do want to say NASA has a website, Spot the Station. Go on Spot the Station. You can actually put in your location, and NASA will send you alerts as to when you can see the space station going overhead. So if you want to see the International Space Station, it's very easy. It's as bright as Venus can get. So brighter than most of the stars in the sky. So even in a very light polluted place like here in Los Angeles, it is so easy to see it. And it's really exciting when it goes over and you can tell people, oh yeah, it's a space station. There's like 7 people on board of that right now with that. So very, very cool. It also tells you about passes. This is telling us the next pass that the station will take. But it's during the daytime, so we ain't gonna see it. But it's still cool to know that the space station in about an hour and 18 minutes will be going over us, and that's the path it's gonna take in the sky. That's a pretty cool thing. So yeah, I mean, ISS Above is really, really cool, and if you can get one, I highly recommend it. And we definitely want to thank ISS Above for providing one for us here at the Columbia Memorial Space Center. It's definitely a very cool thing to come in and take a look from orbit, what's going on down below. And inadvisable sciences, someday we will be taking daily trips to space, and I really hope that we do, and I hope it's sooner rather than later. Bringing a whole bunch of people to space, as many as we can, to have better lives, both for those of us on the ground and those who go to space. It's definitely a pretty big goal for a lot of us working in industry and other things like that. So yeah, I can't help but agree. So now's the Q&A portion. So if anybody's got any questions, would like some answers, we'll be sticking around a little bit to kind of talk about them. Maybe we'll see maybe we'll see if the ISS is in the right spot on its orbit. We can get some live views out of it, but you know, I'll just kind of keep it. Hey, there you go, Expedition 64 crew there. So pretty cool. Glad to see them. They're all so looking good with them there. So so Kevin McCoy asked Jared, any thoughts on disposal or future use of the existing ISS modules? So are we now in the editorial portion of this so let me cover up all the things. Some of the ideas are basically once the space station has reached its lifetime, which some of the modules already on the space station have lasted well beyond their warranty, if you will, and what they were expecting. There's some people who want to ditch the space station into the Southern Pacific. That's sort of we call it the Spacecraft Graveyard, because there's nothing in the South Pacific. So if you want to deorbit something safely, you do it over the South Pacific because nothing there. no land, no people or anything like that. No airplanes flying down in that area. So that's so a lot of people, or some people, want to do that. I don't think that's a good idea. You've got this really great platform in orbit. Mir, they did that with Mir, and there were some reasons for that may make a very you know, it's a long story at that time. Let's just say that the International Space Station was coming up and competition was not really a big thing, or not a thing that was smiled upon back during that time. It's okay though, we have the International Space Station now. But it would be really great if someone, either we add more modules to the International Space Station, refurbish them possibly, or even I think handing off the space station to a commercial partner would be a good idea too. That was something that Mir attempted. There was an actual privately funded mission to Mir by a company called Mir Corp. And they did one, but unfortunately, the powers that be, not in Russia, but other places, were not thrilled with that. So again, I don't want to say walk on eggshells, but the history of the sort of rivalry that Mir and the International Space Station had in the late 90s and early aughts is particularly interesting. You could make a really good thriller movie out of it, honestly. Yeah, I guess bottom line, I would really like to see the International Space Station either continue the international partners or find a commercial provider who would be happy to take it over. And I'm pretty sure there's a lot of companies out there that would love to take over the International Space Station with it. So I would be very sad to see it go. So any means by which we can keep the space station operating, even with other space stations going on, would be fantastic. It would be great. Inadvisable space or science is saying field trips to space even. I agree. I would love to take a field trip to space. I want to go to the moon. The moon sounds like a really fun place to go to. I want to drive around, get in the Jeep and drive around on the moon. It'd be really fun. It's yeah, yeah, a little moon buggy. And then also ISS above. Oh, just letting us know that the space station is going into sunset now. So there ain't going to be no live video. Actually, the space station looks like it's just above the mouth of the Amazon at South America. So space station orbits roughly about every, I think it's 90 minutes. It's like plus minus 3 somewhere in there. I think it's every 93 minutes. I want to say somewhere in there. It depends on how high your orbit is. The higher your orbit, the slower you're going to go. So I don't know I don't know the exact altitude of station today. Actually, one of the cool things that you do get on ISS above is it does show you the exact altitude and velocity of station and its location, longitude, and azimuth. So it's so cool to get to see that in real time. I'm a data junkie, so that's definitely good for me. So ISS above is asking, do you have any comments on the new commercial spacecraft program getting humans to the ISS? Do I have any comments? Are there any comments that I can say? Are they able to? Are we able to say that? So no, I'm just joshing with you all. It's all good. We can definitely talk about it. I think it's a very good program to have. It's definitely been fruitful. You've seen companies like SpaceX thrive out of that program. And spaceflight is sort of having I guess I want to call it like a golden age beginning to build up, something that we really haven't, an optimism that we haven't seen really since the 60s. And that's really nice to see that coming along. Timelines and other things are obviously taking very long time. Physics is what it is. You can't get around it. As much money and tweets with memes as you'd like to, you can't get around physics. So it does get in the way of things. But I think companies like SpaceX and Boeing doing commercial crew. Also, big shout out to Northrop Grumman Innovation Systems as well for their Cygnus spacecraft. That's also somebody part of commercial crew that a lot of people forget about. Their spacecraft also delivers cargo to station along with that. So it's been a very good program. It's a very good model as well because those programs have worked. And what's very exciting is that model is now being applied to a new program in Artemis called the Commercial Lunar Payload Services, or CLPS. And basically, NASA's gone to commercial companies and started competition to see who can deliver instruments for scientists and other things to the surface of the moon. So literally using that same thing that got us the commercial crew and commercial cargo vehicles, but now let's do it for the moon. And it's paying off dividends, and it's very, very exciting to see that happening. Also, ISS above is asking, what do I think about the upcoming Boeing demo flight? So in case you don't know, Boeing did a demo flight of their Starliner commercial crew vehicle last year. They had a multitude of problems. One of the problems was very much are you serious kind of problem. But Boeing has done a tremendous amount of work and has done a very good effort and been very transparent with NASA about what they've been doing to fix things. So Boeing is doing a second orbital flight test. They're doing exactly what the first mission was supposed to do, but didn't. So they're doing it for the second one. They're doing it at their own expense, which is to the tune of about $400 million. So it's expensive. It's necessary. You got to do it. You have to prove that your vehicle actually can do what you've been contracted to do and what you're being trusted to do. Because once you start flying people, the risk becomes tremendous. I mean, anytime you're launching a rocket, you have to be on guard. It can happen any, I mean, a lot of people look at rocket launches as very routine now that, that several companies are stepping up how many fly. But I feel like there's never anything such as a routine rocket launch because it's such an event. It's a lot of power. The tolerances for things going wrong are so small that you could say that there is no tolerance. There's a really great quote by Salvador Dali who says, "Have no fear of perfection, you'll never attain it." Well, obviously Salvador Dali never launched anything into space because you basically have to be near perfect in order to do that. Tom Mueller, who just retired as the head of propulsion from SpaceX, basically, I think a part of the secret sauce that made SpaceX work in the early days. He has a really great quote, which is with launching rockets, a million things have to go right, but it takes one thing to go wrong for it all to end. So yeah, it's really, really tough, and you have to make sure safety is the priority. There are people that actually do advocate for not having safety, and I don't know why they listen to those people. Anyways, whoops, that was opinion. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. Thank you guys for sticking around with us today, especially during the silence at the beginning. We'll go ahead and trim that with it. Just want to let you know some very cool things that we have coming up on next Saturday, December 19th from 4 to 5:30. We are going to be having our live holiday event here on YouTube. So usually we would have the lighting of our Apollo capsule and other things like that, our Apollo boilerplate 12 that we have out in front. But we're going to be doing that virtually this year. You are also welcome to come see it when it's lit up at night. Is it already lit up at night? I believe it is. So you can come see our Mach 32 capable holiday tree that we have out in front. We've got lights on it. It's very cool to see it. We do ask that if you come to the capsule in person, please wear a mask and practice social distancing, as many of us are. And we ask that you do that. Also, for our holiday event on December 19th, just want to let you know that you can actually send us a virtual ornament to hang on the boilerplate. So send us something virtually and we'll put it on our boilerplate. So I think that's really cool. Like, you are putting an ornament on our Apollo tree. How great is that? Like, it's really, really cool. And of course, we will have another Space Center Alive because these are going well. Seems to be everybody's liking them. We're gonna have another one in January. We don't have the official date yet, but we're gonna be taking a look at all of the spaceflight events that are gonna be happening in 2021 because there's a lot of stuff coming up in 2021. A lot of exciting stuff. For me, one of the most exciting things, two exciting things in 2021, launching of the James Webb Space Telescope. Finally, it's been decades of waiting for that. So can't wait for that to happen. And I think one of the most exciting missions in a long time. We're launching a planetary defense mission. We're actually launching a spacecraft that we're going to intentionally crash into an asteroid and see how much it moves that asteroid. So no, it's not like Armageddon where you blow up the asteroid from inside. Can't do that. But we're going to test one of our methods to see if we can actually do that. Because unlike the dinosaurs, we have a space program. So we have the capability to prevent our extinction as a species. This will be one of the first really big tests of seeing as to whether our ideas and our hypotheses will actually work. So want to thank all of you for tuning in today. Also, definitely want to thank our producers, Rick and Sarah as well, for helping make this possible today. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. I can't wait to see you all in January. Stay safe. Stay healthy, enjoy your holidays, and keep exploring, everybody. We'll see you later.